10 spine-chilling bad roommate tales, exposed secret sinister truths that haunt the living. Julia sat on the edge of her slightly worn couch, her heart pounding like a trapped bird in her chest. The evening's stillness was meant to be comforting, but in her quiet suburb just outside Chicago, the air was charged with suspicion. Ethan, her 8-year-old son, was tucked away in his room. Yet, the whispers she heard at night unsettled her, and it didn't help that his tales of an imaginary friend named Billy had begun to feel all too real. A few weeks had passed since she'd agreed to take in Aaron, her best friend Claire's recommendation for a roommate. Initially, he seemed harmless, polite, respectful, and always out of the house during the day. Still, the shadows lurking in the corners of their home had begun to grow thicker, curling around her heart, tightening the grip on her sanity. Strange noises now slithered through the walls, unsettling whispers echoing at late hours, as if someone was having a conversation just out of earshot. "Mommy, Billy says he wants to play hide-and-seek." Ethan would chirp, making her blood run cold. "Playful games in the dark." Julia's stomach twisted. A chill crept along her spine as her son giggled and hid in the far corners of the living room, eyes wide with excitement. Just the thought of Aaron lurking around during those mysterious hours coaxed fear deep into her bones. Was he really just a roommate, or was there something sinister hiding beneath his polite facade? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Muffled phone calls at odd hours began to saturate her nights. The droning, low whispers would seep under her bedroom door, sending icy fingers gripping her throat. Aaron would smile whenever she inquired about it, an unsettling grin that felt too wide, too knowing. "Nothing to worry about, Julia," he'd assure, but his tone held a slice of danger sharp enough to slice the air between them. Rumors of disappearances started to shape themselves in her mind, haunted murmurs echoing from neighbors who barely acknowledged her anymore, their glances filled with pity. Julia needed answers, and when she finally mustered the courage to approach the local police, their dismissive chuckles sent her spiraling. Imaginary friends are common at his age, they echoed with self-assured ignorance, leaving her feeling foolish. But the truth gnawed her, and every jangle of keys, every echo of hurried steps fueled her paranoia. Each night, Julia lay awake, heart pounding, listening as Ethan chattered with an invisible presence in the dark. Shadows danced across the bedroom walls, flickering and teasing her sanity. "Billy told me secrets about Aaron," Ethan whispered one evening, and Julia's breath hitched. Could Aaron really be linked to the mysteries that haunted their neighborhood? What if this polite stranger held a secret that could unravel everything? As dread coiled tightly around her, Julia realized she had to act fast. Now confronted by the rising tide of her fears, she had to choose: either confront Aaron, desperate for the truth, or flee into the dark night, putting distance between herself and the sinister ties that gripped her family. The shadows in the room deepened, closing in as her imagination roared to life. Did she dare put herself face to face with the horror lurking just behind the flickering light bulb? What if Billy wanted her to find out more than she could ever handle? Julia clenched her fists, the fabric of her couch scratching against her palms, grounding her in the chaos. It was now or never. She glanced towards Ethan's room, the door slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning her. The whispers had grown louder since Aaron moved, in echoes of fear wrapped in the lightest giggles. Menacing laughter danced under the fabric of night, each sound a reminder that she couldn't ignore the looming shadows any longer. Taking a deep breath to calm the tempest in her chest, she pushed herself off the couch and stepped carefully towards Ethan's room. The faint glow from his nightlight barely illuminated the edges of his bed, creating long shapes that twisted along the carpet. Julia's heart thundered as she knocked softly on the doorframe. "Ethan." "Billy's telling me a story, Mommy," came the bright reply. But there was something in his tone that struck dread into her heart. He sounded too happy, too immersed in a world where she was not welcome. "Can I come in?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Sure," he chirped, his innocence a stark contrast to the panic spreading in her veins as she slowly opened the door. As she stepped in, she noticed the room was too silent. Ethan sat on the floor, surrounded by toys, a small smile painted on his face. But something stirred in the deepest corner of his room, a shadow that seemed to pulse and breathe. "He's right here," Ethan said, pointing, and Julia flinched at the sudden twist in her gut. "Who, sweetheart?" she asked, feeling her voice tremble. "Billy. He says he wants to show you something," Ethan said, excitement ricocheting off his words like small pebbles against the wall. "No, thank you, Ethan," Julia whispered, her feet moving as if weighted by fear. If there was one thing she had learned, it was to avoid what Billy had to offer. But her resolve melted under the weight of her son's sparkling eyes. "Please, Mommy. Just a little peek." The corner of the room darkened, a palpable shiver skimming Julia's spine. With a reluctant nod, she stepped closer, the air growing thick, almost viscous, as dread thickened her throat. "Okay, just a peek." She noticed the darkness shift subtly, swirling with the ambience of dread as it seemed to breathe in sync with her anxiety. Just as she leaned in, a cold breeze swept through the room, stirring papers and toys, setting them dancing around her. The room felt alien, the atmosphere prickling with an unseen energy. "Look!" Ethan exclaimed, giggling. "He says you have to find the truth." The words pierced Julia's heart, and her gaze shot toward the closet, a natural darkness pregnant with her fears. "Find the truth," she muttered under her breath. Biting her lip, she gathered courage and walked over to it, a mix of terror and adrenaline igniting her. It felt wrong. It felt dangerous. But if there were any answers, perhaps they lay waiting just behind that door. As Julia reached for the handle, the shadows grew colder, and for a moment, she could have sworn she felt a breath on the nape of her neck. "Mommy, hurry." Ethan's voice barely registered above the howling silence. She twisted the handle, flinging the closet door open with a wild rush. An empty void stared back at her, the darkness whispered once more, a thousand secrets swirling just out of reach. No dolls, no clothes, only space, yawning wider than horror itself. A creaking sound echoed from behind her, and Julia's heart dropped. She whipped around, finding Aaron standing in the doorway, his smile gone, replaced with something darker and hungrier. "What are you doing, Julia?" he asked smoothly, his eyes glinting with a menacing edge. The coldness seeped into her bones. She was trapped, boxed in between the horrors of her roommate and the unfathomable secrets hidden in her son's room. "Ethan! Get back!" she shouted, but the words felt feeble against the rising tide of her fears. Billy's laughter echoed again, and in that blinding moment, Julia realized she was not just tangled in her fears. She was ensnared in a battle far greater than she ever imagined. As shadows crawled around her like panicked animals, the chill of realization washed over her. She needed to uncover whatever truth was woven between Aaron and Billy before it consumed them all. But would she discover the truth or lose everything in the process? With the dark closing in on her and the sound of quiet footsteps tracing behind, Julia's heart raced. What was waiting for her beyond that closet? Was it the truth, or something far worse? Julia's breath hitched as Aaron stepped closer, shadows wrapping around his figure like a serpent preparing to strike. "What are you doing in here?" His voice was syrupy sweet, but the menace dripped like venom from his smile. "Just checking on Ethan," Julia managed, forcing her voice to sound steady. But her instincts screamed danger. Behind Aaron loomed darkness, a tangible force that tightened around her heart. "Ethan, come here," Aaron called, a casual warmth overlaying his words. But instead of excitement, Julia's stomach twisted at the fervor in his tone. Ethan's laughter faded, replaced by a sense of foreboding. "Mommy," Ethan's voice trembled, but before he could finish, Aaron's expression sharpened, and he shot a glance towards him. A spark of panic flared in Julia's chest. She couldn't let anything happen to her son. "Stay back, Ethan!" she shouted, her panic now spilling out. Ethan's small body hesitated, caught in the crossfire of confusion. But Billy said enough. Julia barked, the sound echoing in the small room. The cold breeze surged again, swirling the air, making her shiver. "Billy wants to help," murmured Aaron, his eyes narrowing as they slid back to Julia. The room felt claustrophobic, the air thick with tension. "He just wants to show you the truth. Isn't that what you came for?" The dismissive flick of his wrist set a new wave of shadows slithering closer. Julia didn't reply, her thoughts racing. She had to think. She had to protect Ethan. But standing up to Aaron felt like wielding a paper sword against a beast. "Let us just go, okay?" she suggested, a false calm creeping into her voice. "How about we leave the stories for tomorrow?" His laughter peeled back, layer upon layer, revealing the darkness he concealed. "Stories are what breathe life into this house, Julia. You wouldn't want to snuff that out, would you?" Before she could respond, a deep chill swept through the room, heavier than before. Julia felt the shadows tighten around her, drawing ever closer as if they wanted to consume her. Her instincts screamed at her to escape. "Mommy! I'm scared!" Ethan whimpered, stepping back, the shadows there wriggling behind him. "Ethan, listen to me," Julia whispered urgently, "stay by my side and hold my hand. You have to trust me." "Why?" Ethan asked, uncertainty clouding his bright eyes. "Billy, don't say his name," she interrupted sharply, panic threading through her voice. Bang! A toy spaceship fell off the shelf, crashing into the floor, echoing in the silence like a death knell. The shadows twitched, as if jolted by the noise. Aaron shifted his weight, the phantom smile still plastered on his face. "The truth is waiting," he urged, each word dripping with menace. Julia realized some part of her had been hoping that confronting whatever this was could offer protection. But the deeper she dug, the more perilous the ground became. "I want to let you take him," she said, the fire igniting in her tone. "Billy is not real. He is a trick. We can leave this behind." Aaron's laughter exploded, a sound that sliced through Julia's heart. "Oh, Julia, you'll learn what's real," he retorted, a glint of something dark playing in his eyes. Just then, Ethan cried out, his voice frantic and broken. "Billy, he is coming. He is coming, Mommy." Julia's heart sank, the weight of dread suffocating. She could almost feel the shadows creeping closer, hungry and insatiable. She turned, desperately searching for a way out, glancing back at the closet. "Look!" Ethan shouted again, pointing towards the darkened corner. "He wants you, Mommy." The closet was a void of terror, dark and endless, like a mouth ready to swallow her whole. Julia's mind raced, the truth could be within reach, but at what cost? Chilled to the bone, she felt the shadows ripple around her, the air growing heavier. When a loud crash resonated from just outside the room, she froze, terror gripping her throat. What if Aaron wasn't her only concern? What if something more sinister lurked beyond? "Julia," Aaron called, his voice a whisper that slid against her skin, "are you ready to see the truth?" Julia's mind scrambled to grasp the fragments. She stood on the brink of what could be her breaking point. She didn't know who or what she could trust anymore. The choice loomed like a knife at her throat: face the darkness or flee. In that moment, a quiet yet menacing voice filled her mind: "What will you sacrifice to uncover the truth?" And with a shuddering breath, she realized, whatever truth lay ahead could rip apart everything she held dear. As the house creaked ominously, Julia knew she was no longer in control. The dark was alive, and it was hungry for her. But where did it lead, and what unspeakable horrors awaited her within? Julia's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a drum of dread. The shadows pulsed, alive with hunger, swirling around her like a predator toying with its prey. She could feel Ethan's small hand gripping hers, trembling. "Mommy, I want to go home," he pleaded, his voice quaking with fear that mirrored her own. "Not yet, sweetheart," she whispered, forcing a calmness into her words that she didn't feel. "We'll get out of here." But as her gaze flicked to Aaron, the shadows seemed to dance with expectation. "You think you can escape?" he taunted, mirroring the malicious grin of a puppet master. "You're already part of the story, Julia." Behind him, the closet loomed, dark and foreboding. A creaking noise erupted, breaking the silence like a gunshot. "Mommy, he wants you!" Ethan shrieked as a scuttling sound emerged from the closet's void. Julia held her breath. What had she unleashed? "Enough!" she shouted, her voice wavering. "I don't want to play your games." Aaron stepped forward, shadows melding with him, reminding her of tendrils of smoke. "But it's not a game, it's reality." The shadows thickened in response to his words, creeping toward Ethan. Julia felt the temperature drop, as if the air itself were stealing away warmth and hope. "We leave now," she barked, yanking Ethan toward the door that seemed so far away. "Where will you go?" Aaron's voice cut through the air, a chilling whisper that curled around her spine. "You think you can run from the truth?" The door behind her rattled violently, an unseen force slamming against it from the outside. Julia's heart raced, something was fighting to get in. "Mommy!" Ethan cried, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Billy's coming." She spun around in desperation, scanning for a way out. The walls felt like they were closing in, the shadows pooling at her feet, reaching upwards like 1,000 hands reaching for her son. "Julia!" Aaron's voice dripped with mockery. "Do you really want to know what awaits you beyond that door?" The shadows writhed as if eagerly awaiting her answer. Julia's hands trembled, but she squeezed Ethan's tighter, grounding herself in his presence. "We can't stay here, Ethan. We have to push through." But then, the closet shifted. A figure began to materialize, draped in darkness, features indistinguishable yet profoundly unsettling. Julia gasped, her heart leaping into her throat. The outline wavered, the presence exuding a foreboding chill that snaked through her bones. "Your decision will seal your fate," Aaron said, his voice barely above a whisper, each word wrapped in venomous silk. "Choose wisely." "Billy!" Ethan squeaked, eyes wide and terrified. "He's here. He's not nice." "I don't care." Julia snapped, feeling her resolve fraying. The room seemed to tilt, shadows merging and writhing, the energy acutely suffocating. "Ethan, hold on to me." She turned toward the door, but it was no longer visible, engulfed in a thick black fog. "No, no, no. This can't be happening." An agonizing screech erupted behind her, the closet's door flung open, and a gust of cold wind swept through the room. Julia felt a sinister push, a force beckoning her to turn, to face whatever had come forth from the dark. Then, the ground beneath them trembled as if something ancient stirred awake. Julia's feet rooted to the spot, frozen in terror as she dared to glance back. What stepped out from the shadows sent a jolt of primal fear through her veins. Not just a fragment of darkness, but a vile, grotesque figure that twisted the very essence of fear. Its eyes were voids of unending night, its presence suffocating. "Mommy, help!" Ethan screamed, wrenching her from her paralysis. "Run!" she screamed, breaking free from her trance. But where would they go? Before she could move, Aaron's laughter rang out, a haunting melody over the cacophony. "You brought this on yourself, Julia. Welcome to your nightmare." With shadows swirling and the figure claiming the space behind her, Julia bolted, dragging Ethan as uncertainty clawed at them. What lay ahead was lost in the dark, but going back was no longer an option. As they sprinted forward into the suffocating void, a faint voice echoed around them. Are you ready to pay the price for your choices? With every step deeper into the chaos, Julia knew one truth: this was just the beginning. What would they encounter next? Was there truly a way out, or would they be swallowed whole by their darkest fears? The darkness closed around them, a thick blanket of despair that wrapped tighter with each step. Julia dragged Ethan forward, his small feet stumbling over unseen obstacles as both of them fought against the chilling atmosphere. A dreadful silence enveloped them, interrupted only by Ethan's whimpers and Julia's ragged breaths. "Mommy, I can't see!" Ethan cried, panic threading through his voice. "I know, baby. Just hold my hand, okay?" She squeezed him tightly, her heart hammering in fear of losing him in the suffocating dark. But the shadows began to whisper as if they were alive, curling around them like ghostly fingers, assuring Julia that they would not escape easily. "Turn back," one soft voice hissed, slithering through the air. "You can't outrun what you've awakened." Another shadow darted past, a blur of darkness that left icy dread in its wake. Julia's instincts screamed at her to run faster, but the weight of the shadows seemed to drag her down, as if they sought to anchor her in this nightmare. She needed to get out, to get Ethan somewhere safe. She thought back to the closet. No, Julia shuddered at the thought. Not back there. Then a trembling echo of laughter erupted from the dark, familiar yet bitter, like a cruel reminder. "Why do you resist? You're meant to be mine," Aaron called out, his voice drowning in a sea of mockery and malice. "You can't escape yourself." "Shut up!" Julia screamed back, her voice defiant even as her legs quaked with fear. "We don't belong here." Suddenly, an unnatural light flickered in the distance, revealing fleeting glimpses of what lay ahead. A flicker of orange and yellow, nothing more than a dim promise of hope. But as they moved closer, Julia realized that it was not brightness that awaited them. It was a doorway leading to a room. The flickering flames engulfed it, casting chaotic shadows as twisted, tormenting figures danced against the walls. "Mommy! It's too hot!" Ethan wailed, his tiny body recoiling from the warmth that fled through the air. "It's okay. Just stay close." She felt a sudden rush of determination. This door could be a way out. Maybe there was something beyond that awful darkness. As they neared, Julia's heart raced. The doorway loomed larger, each step closer igniting a fire of dread and hope. Just as they were about to cross the threshold, a chilling howl echoed, rattling the walls as the grotesque figure she glimpsed before emerged from the shadows. "Where do you think you're going?" It snarled, its voice a low growl dripping with malice. "You can't escape me. You owe a debt." Julia barely had time to react. The room began to shake, the fire flickering wildly as the shadows boomed to life. Dark hands clawed at her, grasping at her ankles and pulling her back, trying to drag her into their suffocating embrace. Julia screamed, the weight of their shadows becoming unbearable, threatening to snatch away her grip on reality. "Mommy!" Ethan screamed, tears streaking down his face. His little body had begun to tremble violently in terror. "Hold on to me!" Julia shouted, feeling the world start to collapse inwards. She clutched Ethan fiercely, even as the darkness writhed around them like a live thing, whispered secrets washing over her like a storm. "We can make it." With a surge of fear-fueled adrenaline, Julia sprinted toward the door, shielded Ethan from the thrashing shadows that reached for them. The door began to splinter, its frame cracking under the pressure of the malevolent forces that fought to keep them contained. In that moment, time slowed. The evil laughter from Aaron echoed around them, mixing with Ethan's cries. Julia, driven by pure instinct, threw herself forward, plunging into the blazing light at the threshold. What lay beyond the door would either be a refuge or the end of everything they knew. As they crossed into the blinding light, doubt not again, was this the escape she desperately sought, or another trap waiting to ensnare them? And then the light swallowed them whole, fading abruptly into eerie silence. Was it a salvation, or an awakening? As darkness threatened to creep back in, Julia felt a chilling sense of something waiting just beyond the veil. "Mommy, I don't want to be here anymore," Ethan whispered, the echoes of their past trailing after them like shadows. Julia's heart sank as she realized they had traded one nightmare for another. What lay ahead was a question she dreaded to face. Would they ever find peace, or was the cycle of terror far from over? The light shimmered, its warmth tinged with something sinister. Julia blinked, desperate to see clearly as the darkness peeled away, replaced by a strange, warped landscape. She found herself in a room reminiscent of those from her childhood nightmares, the walls coated in peeling wallpaper stained with too many memories. Only the flickering light illuminated the crude outlines of things she couldn't quite recognize. "Mommy?" Ethan's voice broke through her daze, small and terrified. He clutched her hand tighter, nails digging into her skin as he glanced around, eyes wide. The shadows here were different, they slithered across the floor like snakes, whispering secrets that gnawed at Julia's sanity. "Stay close, Ethan," she murmured, panic clawing at her throat. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. A gust of wind whooshed past them, carrying with it an icy draft that made her skin prickle. The sensation was wrong, it carried a sense of malice. "This is all just an illusion," she whispered to herself. "Just a trick, Mommy," Ethan whimpered again, and at that moment, the room shuddered as if in response to his fear. A groan echoed from the walls, a sound so haunting, it felt like the spirits of the damned were trapped within. "Aaron!" Julia shouted, anger surging through her fear. "What have you done? Where are we?" She felt a surge of wrath and despair. "You don't control me." Suddenly, from the far corner of the room, shadows began to solidify, morphing into twisted figures that loomed closer, their faces a grotesque blend of torment and rage. Julia's heart raced as she backpedaled, dragging Ethan with her. "This isn't real. We can't let it control us." But the figures responded to her with a cacophony of laughter, each sound dousing her bravado in cold terror. "You can't leave. You owe us your essence," one shadow hissed, its voice like nails on a chalkboard, piercing through Julia's resolve. "Mommy, make it stop!" Ethan cried, covering his ears. "Run!" Julia screamed, grasping Ethan's hand and pulling him toward an old, rusted door at the room's edge. The shadows lunged, tendrils snaking around her ankles, attempting to pull her back. "I want to let you have him." Adrenaline surged, and with one mighty heave, she ripped free from their grasp. The door handle felt clammy against her palm, and she flung it open, hoping for escape. But what lay beyond made her heart drop. A dark corridor stretched endlessly before them, illuminated only by sputtering lights that flickered like dying stars. "What do we do now?" Ethan clung to her leg, his small form trembling. Julia hesitated, dread settling in her stomach. "We run. Just keep running." They dashed down the corridor, the air thickening with whispers that taunted her, tugged at her dark thoughts. "You can't escape yourself," the voices cooed, echoing Aaron's cruel words, his sinister laughter filling every available space like an ugly perfume. Each step felt heavier, shadows darted beside them, always just out of sight yet always close enough to make their presence known. Suddenly, the corridor ended in an enormous, imposing door marked with ominous symbols that glowed faintly. It pulsed like a heartbeat, slow, deliberate. "Mommy, what's that?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. Julia swallowed hard. "I don't know. But we need to find out. It might be the way out or it could be worse," she admitted, her heart racing as dark thoughts swirled in her mind. As she reached for the handle, a guttural growl erupted behind them. The shadows were advancing, hungry and relentless. "Mommy!" Ethan screamed. Julia turned, heart in her throat, knowing that whatever lay behind that door could mean salvation or doom. A terrifying thought crept in like fog in the chill of night. What if this was all a part of their inevitable fate? "Let us go!" she shouted, throwing open the door and stepping through, uncertainty haunting her every breath. What awaited them on the other side felt alive, as if the darkness itself had wrapped around them once more, entwining them in its grips. Julia felt a lingering presence hovering over A twisted promise of despair that sent icy terror through her veins. As the door slammed behind them, sealing them in, Julia whispered a prayer. Please, let this not be the end, but deep inside, an unsettling realization dawned. Would they ever truly find peace, or was their fate entwined with shadows forever? The darkness shifted, coiling tightly around them like a serpent ready to strike. Julia's chest tightened as she took in their new surroundings. They were in a long, dimly lit hall, lined with doors. Each one appeared warped, as if reality had queasily warped them into grotesque shapes. She could hear muffled whispers seeping from behind the doors, chilling her blood. Stay close, Ethan, she urged, squeezing his hand. Mommy? Ethan's voice trembled barely above a whisper. They moved cautiously, the air thick with anxiety and dread. Julia could feel the pulse of something sinister vibrating all around. A faint scratching sound emerged, echoing down the corridor. It didn't take long for her heart to start racing uncontrollably. Did you hear that? Julia breathed, straining to listen. Ethan nodded, his small, frightened body pressed against hers. What is it? I don't know, but we need to keep moving. She forced herself to step forward. One door boasted a faded, ornate design, seemingly more intact than the others. In a moment of fleeting hope, Julia approached it, pulling Ethan along. Maybe this one is safe, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the strange cacophony that surrounded them. She half expected a light to spill from the crevice beneath the door, a sign of refuge. She grabbed the handle and it felt hot to the touch. With a quick glance back at the dark hallway, Julia yanked the door open. Inside was a stark contrast. Light flooded the room, illuminating a large, plush bed draped in crimson sheets. The room smelled faintly of jasmine, lulling her senses. But as her gaze swept around, dread set in. Framed photographs lined the walls, each image showed a woman with a blood-red smile. Julia's stomach dropped. Do you like it, Mommy? Ethan asked, stepping further into the room. Ethan, no. Julia grabbed his wrist. We can't stay here. But it was too late. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing them in. Aaron, he wouldn't. Her thoughts raced, but they were interrupted by a whisper from a corner of the room. Julia, the voice sounded eerily familiar, echoing with a sorrowful tone. No. She gasped. Get away from us. Ethan cowered behind her. Mommy, who is that? Julia's eyes darted around, scanning for the source of the voice. It was as if the shadows themselves were whispering secrets that only she could understand. I'm not afraid of you. She shouted, though her voice quivered. Suddenly, the photographs vibrated, the women's smiles transforming into twisted grimaces of pain. Your essence is within our grasp, the disembodied voice sang like a haunting lullaby, enveloping them in despair. I want to let you take him. Julia screamed, searching for an exit. With a swift motion, she turned back to the door, but it was solid, unyielding. They were trapped. Mommy, I'm scared. Ethan cried, clinging to her tightly. She could feel him trembling, the fear radiating off him like heat from a fire. Shoo, just hold on to me. She felt her resolve crumbling as the shadows began to creep along the floor, clawing at her ankles, taunting her. An oppressive weight pressed down around them. We can't let them win. With a surge of desperation, she spotted a jagged edge protruding from a corner of the room. It looked sharp, maybe she could break through the door. Julia glanced back at Ethan, meeting his terror-struck eyes. Stay by me. As she charged towards the corner, the shadows shrieked, shrill and piercing. You cannot escape your fate. Julia felt a flicker of hope igniting within her as the shadows swirled like a tempest, desperately trying to envelop her. She swung the object in her hand at the door. Behind her, she could hear Ethan's cries thinning beneath the howling darkness. Through the shrieks and the chaos, one thought bubbled up, rising above the fear. Was this truly the end? Just as she felt a pulse of blinding light surge through the jagged object, a deafening roar erupted, shaking her core. The room trembled violently, everything was about to change. As the shadows shrieked, a new sound arose, the door seemed to vibrate, distorting between dimensions. What lay beyond? Would it lead to salvation or plunge them further into despair? And then, without warning, everything went silent. The door cracked open and a light so bright it stung her eyes poured in. Yet, the shadows loomed behind, waiting, ready to reclaim what they believed belonged to them. "Ethan!" she cried, reaching for her son. But what stood before her now was something they never could have anticipated. Was this moment of light merely an illusion, or was it the beginning of something horrifying and unimaginable? The light poured in with an intensity that made Julia squint. It was blinding, yet she felt an odd pull towards it, as if it could wash away the darkness lurking at her back. "Ethan, come on!" she shouted, desperate. But the shadows clawed at her feet, wrapping around her like cold, wet tendrils, pulling her back. The room twisted around her, the air thick with tension. Ethan's small voice trembled from behind her. "Mommy, I don't want to go." His fear electrified the atmosphere. "Ethan!" She felt the weight of their situation pressing harder as the shadows began to laugh, a cacophony of twisted sound and malice. "Get to the light," she urged, choking on her own panic, but the door, the supposed escape, crackled with energy, shimmering as if it strained to hold back whatever lay on the other side. Julia used every ounce of strength to yank Ethan toward her. But the shadows fought her, writhing and spinning in a dark frenzy. They whispered low, raspy threats, each one like cold fingers trailing across her spine. "Your essence is ours," they mocked, the chorus blending into a single, bone-chilling intonation. "No!" she fought back, rage surging through her. "I want to let you take him." Her heart thundered in her chest as she tugged against Ethan, who, in sheer terror, had rooted himself to the spot. "Mommy, please!" His voice broke her heart and sent a shock of fear through her veins. She couldn't lose him. In the haze of fast encroaching despair, Julia remembered the jagged edge from before. It had to work. They didn't have time to think. With one fluid motion, she swung the object again, this time arcing it toward the light shining through the doorway. A crack echoed as her makeshift weapon collided with the door frame, jagged edges biting into the wood. The light flickered, as if rattled by her determination. For a moment, hope flared anew, gleaming against the dark mass that twisted behind them. "Mommy!" Ethan cried, pressing further against her. She could feel his small hands trembling against her back, anchoring her through the chaos. Julia swung again, each impact sending shockwaves through her body, her feet lifting slightly as the shadows wailed in frustration, as if their barrier was weakening. "Just a little longer. Hold on, Ethan. Just a little bit more." The door creaked, and the bright light swelled and pulsated, pushing back the darkness with a force that felt alive. But the shadows were relentless, wrapping around Julia's legs like shrouds of despair. She was losing ground. Julia's voice, as familiar as her own, suddenly broke into the chaos, smooth and seductive. "You don't have to fight this fight. Join us, I can give you everything you desire." "No!" she shouted, the lingering trace of recognition chilling her more than any specter. "You're not real." But doubt seeped into her heart, whispering promises of peace and safety. A momentary pause threatened to steal her resolve. But Ethan needed her. With a furious scream that echoed through the hall, Julia struck the door again. The shadows howled, retreating ever so slightly, as the door shuddered in response. Come on," she urged, as Ethan clung to her. Her breath was ragged, chest heaving, every muscle screaming for release. The door began to splinter, a crack weaving like a jagged line of fire. But the shadows surged forward, a last attempt to claim them. They reached for Ethan, their fingers stretched in a grotesque dance. In that moment, Julia felt their energy spike, a raw pulse that ignited a primal instinct deep within her. She realized she was the barrier. She was the choice. With an explosion of will, she pushed through the pain, driving the jagged object again and again. "We want to let you take him." Every word became a battle cry that cut through the darkness. The door snapped open with a shattering crack, revealing a blinding expanse. But the shadows were furious, swirling like a tempest ready to retaliate. As Julia took one last look back, a haunting thought clawed at the edges of her mind: what would happen if they stepped into the light? What unknown horrors could still await them? "Mommy!" Ethan called, yanking her toward the door. She could feel her heart racing, uncertainty coiling with hope. "Please, let it be safe," she murmured as they stepped through into the brightness. But as they emerged, the world shifted again, the air around them rippling unsettlingly. What awaited them on this side? Was it freedom, or had the darkness merely shifted to swallow them whole? A scream echoed in the distance, distant yet piercing, demanding their attention. The scream sliced through the bright space like a blade, and Julia stopped dead in her tracks. The light that had once felt inviting now pulsed ominously around them, bathing everything in a disorienting glow. She scanned their new environment. A barren corridor stretched before them, walls damp and painted a sickly yellow. There was no escape from the chill that now laced the air, just the gut-wrenching certainty that they hadn't escaped at all. "Mommy, I'm scared." Ethan's voice trembled, and Julia felt the weight of that fear settle heavily in her stomach. "Shoo, it's okay, Ethan," she whispered, trying to sound calm, attempting to project the reassurance she so desperately wanted to feel herself. But her heart was a frantic drum in her chest, each beat a reminder of the darkness they'd just barely escaped. They moved forward cautiously, every step echoing unnervingly in the empty corridor. A flickering light overhead cast eerie shadows that danced on the walls. Julia's instincts screamed at her to turn back, but she pressed on, gripping Ethan's hand tight enough to feel his pulse hammering against her palm. Then the scream came again. Closer this time. Raw, agonizing. It echoed again and again until it began to twist into laughter, a twisted, mocking laughter that seemed to surround them. Julia felt ice creep up her spine. "What is that?" Ethan whispered, peering around, his small frame trembling beside her. "I don't know," she answered, her voice low and shaking. They crept forward, every sound amplified in the stillness: breath, footsteps, the faint crackle of electricity above. Suddenly, a door on the left flew open with a bang, slamming against the wall. A figure stumbled out, disheveled and wide-eyed, just as lost as they were. Julia's breath caught in her throat. The woman was drenched in sweat, clothes hanging off her like a rag doll. "Help me. Please." She gasped, her voice raw and frantic. "Where are we?" Julia demanded, her heart racing with both caution and dread. The woman's gaze darted around, as if she could feel something lurking in the shadows. "It won't let you leave. It knows. It's too late for me. You have to run." "Run where?" Julia shouted, panic rising. She looked at Ethan, who clung to her like a lifeline, his wide eyes reflecting terror. "No!" the woman screamed. "You don't understand. Look behind you." Julia turned as the lights above flickered violently, plunging them into darkness for a brief, frozen moment. When the lights returned, the corridor shifted. Figures appeared, shrouded in shadow, grotesque faces twisted in malicious grins, reaching forward with hands too long and thin. "Mommy!" Ethan squealed, his small voice brimming with panic, pulling against Julia's grip. "Stay close to me." She backed up instinctively, feeling the chill of fear seep through her entire being. The figures began to inch closer, their whispers now a tempest of maddening promises. "Join us, you will be free." The door to the outside world loomed in the distance, bright against the nightmare closing in on them. But doubt gnawed at Julia. What lay beyond that door? "Run!" she gasped, yanking Ethan forward. Their feet pounded against the floor, chasing the light as the shadows clawed at their heels. The screams around them grew, a cacophony of desperate souls battling for escape. Julia's heart thundered, each pulse demanding they push faster. She could feel the shadows' cold breath on their backs, hot with malice. "Faster, Mommy!" Ethan cried, and they surged toward the light, a fragile hope urging them on, but closer they got, the light dimmed and flickered, like a dying ember in the storm. Was it truly a way out, or the first step deeper into despair? As they reached for the door handle, icy fingers wrapped around Julia's wrist, pulling her back. "No! No! No!" she screamed as they fought against the encroaching darkness. But the echoes of despair engulfed them, drowning out everything else. And then, a glimpse caught her eye, a figure emerging from the shadows. Was it friend or foe? "Help us!" she shouted, desperation laced through her veins. But as the figure stepped closer, it smiled a knowing, sinister smile, stretching impossibly wide. Julia's blood ran cold as the last vestiges of light flickered, and she realized the horrifying truth: they might not be the only ones in need of rescue. What fate awaited them on the other side of that door? The light swallowed them whole, but as it faded, Julia felt her heart plummet. There was no refuge, only another nightmare swirling around them. The corridor before them pulsed with a sickly yellow glow, shadows creeping along the walls, taunting them. "Mommy, I'm scared." Ethan clung to her side, his small body shaking. "Just stay with me," Julia whispered, forcing courage into her voice. She couldn't afford to let him see her fear, not now. They ventured cautiously forward. Each echoing step felt heavier, the air thickening with a palpable dread. The distant laughter slithered around them, wrapping tighter until it felt almost suffocating. "Where are we?" Ethan's voice trembled, and Julia once again felt the weight of every horror they had faced. Her instincts screamed that this place was a trap, an extension of Aaron's sinister machinations. "Keep moving, Ethan," she urged, her grip tightening on his hand. But suddenly, a door flung open at the far end of the corridor, a wild figure tumbling out, sweaty and frantic. "Help me!" the woman cried, eyes wide with terror. "It won't let you leave. It knows." Julia's stomach churned. "What knows? Where are we?" "It's too late for me," the woman shouted, glancing back toward the door like a rabbit fleeing a wolf. "You have to run while you still can." Julia felt a cold dread settle in her bones. "Run where?" she shouted as the shadows grew restless, dark figures emerging from their concealment. "Behind you!" The woman's scream clawed at Julia's senses. Julia spun around just as the lights flickered out. In the darkness, she heard them, the whispers. "Join us, you will be free, Ethan," she yelled, yanking her son close as the lights flickered back on. Shadows danced malevolently, their eyes glinting with insatiable hunger. "Mommy, please!" Ethan wailed, the terror in his voice piercing her heart. "Stay close." She backed up instinctively, her mind racing for a way out. The figures, clawing at the edges of the light, loomed nearer. Then, a doorway glimmered in the distance, a bright escape promising freedom. "Run!" she screamed, her heart pounding as they dashed forward, the cacophony of wails chasing them. Every ounce of fear fueled her legs, propelling her toward that door. "Mommy! Faster!" Ethan cried, and she felt the shadow's icy breath against her back, the darkness whispering enticing lies of safety. "You must join us." "No!" she replied fiercely, pulling Ethan as they surged forward, relentlessly pursuing the light. It flickered and dimmed, testing their resolve, but hope flickered anew in her heart. Ethan stretched his delicate fingers toward the doorknob. "Mommy, please." Then, in a split-second moment, icy tendrils tightened around Julia's wrist, pulling at her with force that threatened to crush her spirit. "No!" she screamed, fighting against them, panic igniting inside her. "Let us go." The shadows laughed, malevolent satisfaction filling the air. "You are part of this now. It's too late to escape." But as they yanked her back, something burst to life inside Julia, a fierce, wild rage. I won't let you take him. She shouted, defiance sparking like fire in her belly. Fueled by raw instinct, she struck at the shadows, fighting for the light. She reached for the doorknob again and twisted hard, her soul igniting with determination. The door shuddered beneath her grip, cracking like an eggshell. We deserve to be free. We want to be part of your darkness. Suddenly, everything imploded. Darkness roared, shadows howled, and Ethan's scream echoed in the madness. Then, the door exploded open, washing them in blinding brightness that shattered the confinement of the shadows. Julia felt the darkness peel away, its grip finally broken. She wrapped her arms around Ethan, the world swirling as they surged forward into the light, but as they stumbled into the white space, uncertainty loomed larger than fear. A sharp scream pierced the silence, echoing from behind the door they had fled. It resonated like a funeral knell. "Mommy," Ethan whispered, his tiny voice shaky. Julia looked around, trying to make sense of their new surroundings. Were they truly free, or were they merely puppets freed from one evil only to fall into another? "We need to keep moving," she said, her heart pounding. "What if it comes back?" Ethan asked, eyes wide, reflecting both fear and innocence. "It won't find us," Julia promised, though doubt gnawed. But there was no time to linger. They had fought through darkness, they could fight their way to safety. As they pressed forward, a chilling thought lingered: how could they be free when darkness had coiled around their hearts, with fear as their shadow and hope as their guide? Julia and Ethan ventured onward, uncertain of the road ahead. They were alive. They were together. And now, they would face whatever came next. The journey was not over. They would find the truth together, or fall into darkness once more. But this time, they would fight. Before they moved further, Julia turned firm resolve settling in. "We'll never give up, Ethan. No matter what." And as she held her son close, shadows began to withdraw, revealing a path ahead, a path lit by the promise of a new beginning. But in the distance, laughter echoed ominously. They may have escaped one nightmare, but the shadows were never far behind. "Let us go." And with every step, they began to reclaim the light of their lives. If you've loved this journey, now is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe to the channel immediately so you don't miss the next chilling story. Smash that like button now. Each tap feeds the algorithm and helps bring more spine-chilling tales to you. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories. What do you think will happen next? Your voice matters. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this thrilling conclusion. Join the community and ensure that our stories of mystery and fright keep coming. Do it now.